The invitation arrived sealed in light. Adrian Vale stared at the hovering sigil rotating slowly above his desk and wondered which ancestor he had offended. The royal crest of the Thaleran Empire pulsed in pale silver, waiting for biometric confirmation. His diplomatic handler stood across the room with the posture of a man who had rehearsed bad news in 12 different tonal registers. "It's only a reception," the handler said carefully. "High level, symbolic, do not improvise." Adrian pressed his thumb to the sigil. The seal dissolved into streaming script. "Observe," the handler continued. "Respond only when addressed. Avoid humor. Their culture interprets metaphor as intent and intent as oath." Adrian blinked. "Avoid humor, that's half my personality. Then use the other half." He exhaled slowly. "Is the Queen attending?" The handler's silence answered first. "Yes," he finally said. "Her Majesty Lysera Thane will preside." Adrian had studied the briefings. The Queen appeared almost human in structure, tall, composed, dark-eyed, but her long, elegant ears curved backward slightly, moving with subtle precision when she listened. Thaleran physiology allowed them to detect micro-fluctuations in tone and breath. Lying to her, according to rumor, felt like trying to whisper in a vacuum. "Remember," the handler added, lowering his voice, "in their court, compliments are contracts." "That's absurd," Adrian said. "It is tradition." "Of course it is." The reception unfolded in a chamber suspended above the planet's luminous rings. Delegates stood beneath shifting gravitational fields that adjusted subtly to maintain ceremonial posture. Translators shimmered faintly in the air, converting cadence into mutual comprehension. Every sentence sounded like it had passed through 17 committees before reaching a mouth. Adrian kept his hands loosely clasped behind his back. He had practiced neutral expression in reflective panels. He had memorized trade statistics, border projections, and 12 variations of respectful nods. Nobles approached him in turn. "We welcome Terran cooperation," one said, voice perfectly measured. "We anticipate mutual prosperity," said another, equally precise. Adrian responded with rehearsed diplomacy, careful not to embellish. He felt like a man tiptoeing across a minefield built of grammar. Then the chamber shifted. The Queen entered without fanfare. Conversation did not stop. It softened, reorganized, recalibrated. Adrian felt the gravitational hum change pitch as if the room itself recognized her authority. She moved with steady calm, acknowledging dignitaries with minimal gestures. When she reached him, she did not hesitate. "Envoy Vale," she said. Her voice carried no theatrical force, yet the entire chamber listened. Up close, he noticed the way her long ears angled slightly forward, attentive, responsive, not decorative, observing. "Your Majesty," Adrian replied, executing his most balanced nod. "I have reviewed your prior negotiations in the Ardent Corridor," she said. "You favored direct resolution over layered incentives." "I favor fewer layers when possible," he answered before thinking. A faint ripple moved through nearby nobles. Her ears shifted slightly. "You find our methods excessive." He felt the handler's ghost screaming in his skull. "Avoid humor. Avoid improvisation." "I find them thorough," Adrian corrected carefully. "Terrans tend to simplify when we can. It saves time." "And time," she said, "is the only resource no empire replenishes." There it was, the weight of centuries behind a simple sentence. She studied him, not with suspicion but curiosity. "What is your assessment," she continued, "of our expansion toward the Hellion expanse?" This was the question. Political, volatile, layered with risk. Advisors subtly leaned closer, translators brightened. He should have delivered something measured, strategic, unoffensive. Instead, he heard himself speak. "If you're going to reshape half the galaxy, Your Majesty, you might as well do it beautifully." Silence struck like a vacuum breach. He felt it physically, the air compressing, the hum of gravitic anchors thinning. Somewhere a glass chimed against a metallic surface and did not dare continue. He blinked. He replayed his sentence internally. It had sounded harmless in his head, lightly admiring, slightly humorous. In this room it landed like a declaration carved into stone. The queen did not look offended, she looked thoughtful, her ears angled forward then stilled. Beautifully, she repeated. Adrian cleared his throat. Strategically beautiful. Efficient, elegant in execution. I meant, he stopped. Every additional word felt like digging deeper into ceremonial quicksand. A noble to his left inhaled sharply. The queen stepped closer, closing the conversational distance by a fraction that felt seismic. You admire vision, she said. Yes, he replied automatically. When it's earned. Another ripple moved through the court. Earned. He resisted the urge to physically slap his own mouth. And you believe ours is? She asked. I believe, Adrian said, heart now attempting orbital escape velocity, that ambition without grace breeds resentment. But ambition guided with clarity, that shapes history. He had meant it as policy analysis. It sounded like devotion. The queen's gaze held his. He saw calculation there, but not manipulation, evaluation. In a court built on layered flattery, he had offered something blunt. Nearby, one advisor whispered, intent declaration. Adrian almost laughed from pure panic. I assure you, he began, I intended no. She raised a hand gently. You speak without rehearsal, she said. Yes, your majesty. And without fear. I assure you, he replied, attempting humor as shield. I am experiencing a significant amount of fear. A faint smile touched her expression. It was small but unmistakable, soft laughter hers. The sound fractured the tension more effectively than any decree. You fear consequence, she observed, ears adjusting minutely, but not truth. I try not to, he admitted. She regarded him for a long moment that stretched across diplomatic eternity. Envoy Vale, she said at last, voice calm and clear. In this court, declarations of admiration for a sovereign's vision carry personal implication. His stomach dropped. I see, he managed. That was not my calculated intent. I am aware, she said. The noble stirred again. Aware, not offended. She turned slightly, addressing the chamber while still facing him. Authenticity, she said evenly, is rarer than strategy. Adrian stood frozen, wishing briefly for a malfunctioning transporter beam. She looked back at him, long ears angled with precise attention. Tell me, envoy, she said quietly enough that only those nearest could hear. If you admire beauty and ambition, would you stand beside it? The handler's earlier warning echoed in his mind. Compliments are contracts. He swallowed. I would stand beside integrity, he answered carefully. Beauty tends to follow. A noble audibly dropped something metallic. The queen did not break eye contact. And somewhere deep within the humming machinery of the palace, something subtle shifted, not with outrage, not with scandal, but with interest. Adrian realized too late that he had spoken far more than he intended, and the court had heard every word. The silence did not break all at once. It fractured slowly, like thin ice deciding whether to hold. Adrian remained where he stood, acutely aware that he had just walked verbally into something vast and ceremonial. The queen's last question lingered in the charged air. Would you stand beside it? He had answered, not elegantly. Not strategically, but honestly. That seemed to be the problem. A senior noble cleared his throat with the force of a diplomatic alarm. Your Majesty, he began carefully, shall we proceed with the scheduled affirmations? Lysera did not look away from Adrian. In a moment, she said. Her long ears shifted slightly, angling toward him again. He had the unsettling impression that she was listening not just to his words, but to the rhythm beneath them. His handler, positioned several paces away, had gone pale in at least 2 visible spectrums. You understand, she said to Adrian, her tone calm, that in Thaelrin custom, to publicly admire a sovereign's vision in aesthetic and personal terms implies alignment beyond policy. He considered pretending to faint. I suspected I may have miscalculated, he admitted. A faint ripple of restrained shock moved through the court. Miscalculated. The word alone carried layers. "You admit error openly," she observed. "Yes, Your Majesty, it's a Terran specialty." A few diplomats from minor systems exchanged confused glances. One actually coughed to conceal a laugh. The Queen's ears twitched. "You believe this an error?" she asked. "I believe," Adrian said carefully, "that I may have stepped into cultural territory without a map." "And yet," she replied, "you did not retreat." He almost smiled. Retreating mid-sentence is rarely graceful. Her expression shifted, subtle but unmistakable amusement. Around them, tension coiled and recalibrated. Advisors whispered into discreet comm links. Translation algorithms flickered, cross-referencing ancient precedents. One of the Queen's counselors stepped forward. "Your Majesty, clarification may be required. The envoy's statement could be formally recorded as—" "As what?" she asked mildly. "As an expression of personal allegiance." Adrian's internal organs attempted resignation. Lysera finally turned slightly, acknowledging the wider chamber. "Is sincerity now to be codified as sedition?" No one answered. She faced Adrian again. "You spoke of integrity," she said. "Explain." He exhaled slowly. If he was going to fall into a ceremonial abyss, he might as well do it coherently. "Integrity," he said, "is when ambition serves more than itself, when expansion strengthens stability rather than ego, when leadership doesn't require constant performance." A noble gasped softly at the word performance. Adrian continued anyway. "From what I've observed, Your Majesty, your empire expands with infrastructure, not just banners. That's rare." The Queen's ears angled forward again, attentive. "And beauty?" she asked. "Beauty," he said, feeling reckless now, "is when power doesn't need to prove it's powerful." Silence again, but different this time, not shocked, considering. One of the outer system delegates muttered, "He's either extraordinarily brave or terminally unaware." "Both," Adrian murmured under his breath. Lysera heard him. Of course she did. A faint smile touched her mouth. "You are aware," she said, voice carrying just enough to reach the assembly, "that declarations made in my presence are binding." "Yes, Your Majesty." "And you stand by your words?" He hesitated only briefly. "Yes." There it was. No backpedaling, no disclaimers. The chamber seemed to lean inward collectively. Her gaze did not waver. "In our tradition," she said slowly, "to publicly affirm admiration for a sovereign's vision and person is an act typically reserved for those seeking lifelong alignment." His handler made a small strangled noise. Adrian blinked. Lifelong is a substantial time frame. A ripple of scandalized energy coursed through the nobles. The Queen's ears flicked with unmistakable amusement. "Do Terrans fear longevity?" she asked. "We prefer reading the contract before signing," he replied. Several minor dignitaries failed to suppress laughter. It spread carefully, like contraband humor sneaking past protocol. Lysera regarded him thoughtfully. "You have not attempted to retract your statement," she said. "I don't retract truth," he answered. "I just occasionally regret its timing." That earned a clearer laugh from her this time. It was not loud, not disruptive, but it was genuine. The effect was seismic. The court had not heard their queen laugh in open assembly in years. An elder counselor stepped forward again, emboldened by confusion. "Your Majesty, if the envoy's words are to be interpreted within ceremonial precedent, a formal response may be required." Lysera's gaze sharpened slightly. "Required by whom?" "By tradition." She turned fully now, addressing the chamber. "Tradition exists to preserve wisdom," she said evenly, "not to suffocate discernment." Then she looked back at Adrian. "You claim no ambition for power here." "None," he said immediately. "My government would panic." A faint chorus of uncomfortable agreement murmured through the human delegation. "And you did not intend courtship?" "I intended diplomacy," he said. "Possibly light admiration, not courtship." "Light admiration," she repeated thoughtfully. "Yes, Your Majesty, the harmless kind." Harmless, she echoed, as though testing the concept. Her ears tilted back slightly, processing, evaluating. Finally, she took one small step closer. In a court saturated with rehearsed loyalty, she said quietly, your unguarded speech is disruptive. I'm beginning to understand that. Disruption, she continued, is not inherently negative. The counselor stiffened. She lifted her voice just enough for all to hear. I find authenticity preferable to performance. The words landed heavier than any accusation could have. A silence followed, not stunned this time, but shifting. She studied him once more. Envoy Vale, she said, calm and clear, your statement will be reviewed in accordance with cultural precedent. His heart dropped again. But, she added, and her ears angled toward him in unmistakable focus, it will not be dismissed. A noble whispered, interpreted as proposal. Another replied, impossible. Adrian swallowed. Your Majesty, with respect, I hope the review process includes flexibility. Flexibility, she said, almost amused, is a strength when wielded deliberately. She paused, and I am very deliberate. The reception resumed slowly, like a system rebooting after unexpected input. Conversations restarted, though now every exchange contained a subtle undercurrent. Delegates watched Adrian as if he had spontaneously grown additional limbs. His handler rushed to his side. What did you do? He hissed quietly. I spoke, Adrian replied, without thinking. Yes. The handler closed his eyes briefly. We trained you for 3 years. And I listened, Adrian said, mostly. Across the chamber the queen watched him, not with irritation, not with triumph, with interest. Her long ears shifted minutely as nobles approached her, offering careful commentary disguised as congratulations or concern. Adrian felt it then, not doom, not scandal. Momentum. He had stepped into something he did not understand. And the queen, instead of retreating from his uncalculated words, seemed to be considering them, not as insult, not as mistake, but as possibility. By the following cycle, Adrian had acquired 3 things: a formal request for private audience, 12 contradictory advisory messages from Earth, and a reputation he had not applied for. The advisory messages were particularly unhelpful. Clarify immediately. Do not clarify. Apologize diplomatically. Do not apologize under any circumstances. One message simply read, "What did you say?" He powered down his comm panel before a 4th message could arrive suggesting he fake a minor illness and request evacuation. The summons from the queen was precise. No audience chamber. No nobles. A restricted council wing calibrated for secure conversation. That at least felt less like a public execution. When he entered, Lysera was already present, reviewing a holographic projection of shifting trade routes. The projection collapsed at a subtle gesture from her hand. You requested clarification, she said. I requested survival, he replied automatically, then winced. Clarification seemed adjacent to that. Her ears flicked slightly. Not annoyance, interest. You fear that your words bound you to an outcome you did not intend. Yes. You regret speaking honestly. No, that answer came faster than the others. He surprised himself. She noticed. You regret the consequences, she said. I regret not knowing what they are. A pause settled between them, not hostile, measured. In our culture, she said, public declarations regarding a sovereign's character and vision are rarely casual. They signal alignment of purpose. I understand that now. And if I were to interpret your words as such alignment, he hesitated. This was the center of it. I would ask, he said carefully, whether alignment requires romance. A faint shimmer passed through her expression, not quite amusement, not quite surprise. You assume this concerns romance. Your counsel seems convinced it does. My counsel is accustomed to ambition disguising itself as affection. And I, he said dryly, am apparently guilty of accidental devotion. That earned him the smallest upward curve of her mouth. You do not seek my throne. Absolutely not. I can barely manage my own schedule. You do not seek influence. I seek efficient agreements and edible food. Edible, she repeated. I have been served 3 ceremonial dishes that glowed faintly. I remain cautious. Her ears twitched more noticeably this time. You find humor in instability, she observed. I find humor in panic, he corrected. It's preventative. She considered him in silence long enough that he wondered if he had misstepped again. You are aware, she said slowly, that by refusing to retract your words you have already altered court perception. I suspected as much. I've been watched like a rare mineral sample. You are being evaluated. That sounds slightly worse. For compatibility, she clarified. He blinked. Compatibility with what? With me. There it was, direct, unlayered. He exhaled slowly. Your Majesty, I intended admiration, not proposal. I am aware. And yet, she said, stepping closer by a measured degree, you demonstrated something none of my formal suitors have. He waited. You spoke without calculating gain. I miscalculated risk, he offered. That is different. A soft chime interrupted them, an advisor requesting access. She dismissed it without glancing at the interface. Your spontaneity, she continued, is not recklessness. It is unfiltered sincerity. I assure you, he said, it is occasionally recklessness. Her ears angled toward him again, attentive to the tonal shift. You do not lie, she said. I try not to, it's inefficient. In my species, she said quietly, our auditory perception evolved to detect microdeception. Most political speech is loud. And mine, yours was clear. The word landed differently than praise. Outside this chamber, the court was fracturing into factions. Some argued she should dismiss the incident as cultural misunderstanding. Others insisted precedent required formal acknowledgement of a binding declaration. A discreet alert flickered at the edge of Adrian's vision, an Earth representative requesting immediate update. He ignored it. If I may ask, he said carefully, what do you intend to do? She did not answer immediately. Instead, she activated another projection, a web of alliances spanning systems, trade corridors glowing in shifting light. My empire stands at a threshold, she said. Expansion requires stability. Stability requires trust. And you believe I provide that. I believe, she said, that authenticity is rarer than any mineral in contested space. He laughed softly. That might be the most flattering thing anyone has said to me while considering possible matrimony. Matrimony, she repeated, tasting the Terran word. Yes, the large ceremonial event with vows and mild panic. Her expression softened further. You fear losing autonomy. I value informed consent. She nodded once. As do I. That shifted something. You are not obligated, she said evenly. I will not compel alignment. Relief flickered through him, followed immediately by something else. Not disappointment, not quite. If you choose to interpret my words as symbolic only, he said, I will not protest. And if I do not, he met her gaze fully now. Then I would ask to understand you before any declaration becomes destiny. Silence held. Not tense, intent. Her ears angled slightly outward, then back. That, she said quietly, is a reasonable condition. A faint alarm chimed again outside the chamber. The court's impatience made audible. She ignored it once more. You are aware, she said, that my announcing a choice would be irreversible. He smiled faintly. I have gathered that your culture does not include trial engagements. No, and yet, he continued, you hesitate. Her gaze sharpened. I evaluate, she corrected. Of course. She studied him one final time as though comparing projected futures. You disrupted my court, she said. I apologize for the disruption. I did not say it was unwelcome. There it was again, that subtle undercurrent of interest. She deactivated the projections. The council will convene, she said. They will recommend containment. Containment of me. Of uncertainty. He considered that. I am uncertain about many things, he admitted, but not about what I said. Her ears shifted. You stand by your admiration. Yes, and your claim that beauty follows integrity. Yes. Another silence. Very well, she said at last. Very well what? He asked cautiously. Very well, Envoy Vale, she replied. We will continue this evaluation. Evaluation, he repeated weakly, for partnership. He almost laughed again. That sounds remarkably formal. It is, and the timeline. In my culture, she said calmly, life decisions are not rushed. That, he admitted, is reassuring. She turned slightly toward the exit. The court expects resolution, she said. And you? She paused. I expect honesty. He nodded once. That at least I can provide. As he left the chamber, his comm panel erupted with waiting messages. He powered it on. The first message from Earth read, Are you engaged? He stared at it for a long moment. Then he typed back, Under review. Across the palace, Queen Lysera Thane stood before her advisors, long ears angled in quiet contemplation. The court anticipated scandal. She was considering possibility. The week that followed unfolded like a slow orbit, every interaction measured against both expectation and surprise. Adrian found that the court had not settled on how to respond to his unguarded declaration. Some factions treated it as an extraordinary breach, others as a fascinating anomaly. He became a fixture in strategic councils, his input simultaneously valued and suspiciously analyzed. No one questioned his presence, but everyone questioned the implications. He tried humor to ease the tension. During a discussion about resource allocation on Hellion Prime, a delegate suggested diverting energy to shield generators. Adrian replied, If shields get too strong, we may accidentally repel our own satellites. Gravity doesn't appreciate irony. The room remained still for a heartbeat, then a few suppressed chuckles appeared. Even Queen Lysera's long ears twitched slightly in amusement, though her expression remained composed. A minor crisis arose the next day. One of the outer colonies reported unexpected fluctuations in the orbital stabilizers, causing minor disruptions in trade traffic. Advisors clamored for immediate action. Directives flew in a dizzying stream. Adrian examined the telemetry, ran rapid calculations on energy output, and suggested a sequence of adjustments to stabilize the orbits. Lysera, attending beside him, spoke to the assembly. Observe how cross-cultural insight can simplify solutions. She framed his practical intervention as a demonstration of collaboration between species. He suppressed a grin, appreciating her subtle humor as she rebranded his calculations as spectacle rather than simple troubleshooting. Later, when he sought her privately, she was standing near the observation dome. Freighters arced gracefully around the capital, gravitic trails glowing faintly against the void. Her long ears swiveled gently as she regarded him. Your approach is unconventional, she said. Terran logic, humor, and hesitation combined with skill. You disrupt expectations without disorder. Adrian raised an eyebrow. Disrupt without disorder. That's diplomatic speak for I annoy people in useful ways. Her lips quirked in the faintest hint of amusement. Precisely. Useful annoyance is rare in our court. The day continued with negotiations and ceremonial obligations. Each time Adrian spoke, his words carried weight far beyond their content. Some counselors attempted to challenge him subtly, offering half-completed treaties or ambiguous proposals. He countered with measured responses and dry remarks that skirted offense while resolving practical problems. Lysera, beside him, amplified his contributions strategically, presenting them to the court as insight rather than interference. His humor, though slight, became a buffer for tension. One evening, a social gathering brought diplomats into the palace's biodome, a lush garden suspended in zero gravity, filled with alien flora that glowed faintly. Adrian walked alongside Lysera, marveling at flowers that rotated slowly in orbit and tiny vines that emitted soft harmonic pulses when touched. He attempted a joke about the difficulty of watering plants in zero-G, only to have one vine vibrate in response. They heard you, she said, ears twitching. They appreciate humor too. He laughed softly. I fear they may judge my competence if I continue. You are already under scrutiny, she replied. Judgment is inevitable. The question is whether it fears or admires you. Her presence made the court's rigid rules feel less constraining. He noticed that when she spoke of choices, decisions, and alignment, she often left him room to exercise judgment rather than dictating action. It was a subtle but powerful shift, teaching him that influence could be exerted without force. His role was no longer simply to comply or to observe. He was now a participant in the unfolding of outcomes. A minor debate erupted over the energy allocations for interstellar communication relays. Adrian proposed a sequence of adjustments that preserved efficiency without compromising safety protocols. One nervous counselor remarked that Terrans were notoriously impulsive. Lysera's ears flicked in his direction, and she rephrased Adrian's plan as an example of practical foresight in unpredictable environments. The nervous counselor's blush matched the pulsing glow of the nearby energy conduits. By midweek, the court had begun to accept a new reality. The warnings about his earlier statement no longer dominated discussion. The focus had shifted to observing how his authenticity, moderated by humor and caution, influenced outcomes. He was both less fearful and more confident, understanding that sincerity could be a stabilizing force even amid political complexity. One night after the last of the freighters had returned to orbit, Lysera approached him in the gardens once again. You have adapted, she said. You do not attempt to manipulate, yet you are not passive. You contribute, but you do not overreach. I'm beginning to understand that honesty, carefully applied, is more effective than any grand strategy, he replied. Correct, she said, and humor is your shield. He laughed, partly from relief, partly from recognition. The court, the empire, and the diplomatic machinery remained unpredictable, but with her guidance and his willingness to speak plainly, even when it caused small tremors, he had discovered a rhythm. The chapter ended with them standing near the central gravitic fountain of the palace. Alien flowers floated around them, illuminated by the pale light of distant stars. They were silent, but the silence was shared, comfortable, and purposeful. The galaxy beyond the capital hummed with potential conflict and intrigue, yet for the first time, Adrian felt a measure of agency. His words, uncalculated yet sincere, had altered the landscape, not by force but by choice. And Lysera, attentive and deliberate, remained at his side, confirming that some outcomes required patience, subtlety, and the courage to speak without thinking. The council convened in full orbit above the planet, the chamber suspended by a lattice of gravitic stabilizers that hummed softly beneath the polished floor. Delegates from the outer systems floated in assigned positions, holographic translations shimmering faintly in the air. Adrian Vale stood at his designated place, hands behind his back, data slate in hand, observing but not intruding. He had learned patience, restraint, and the subtle power of truth. Queen Lysera entered, moving with the same calm authority she had displayed from the first moment. Her long ears swiveled gently as she acknowledged each delegate, then returned to Adrian. He felt no fear this time, only readiness. Envoy Vale, she said, voice carrying across the chamber. Your insight has proven unexpectedly effective. Your observations and judgments have stabilized several disputes that might have escalated into interstellar incidents. Adrian inclined his head. I merely applied what I knew. You amplified it with perspective. She allowed herself a small, controlled smile. Perspective requires honesty, observation, and occasionally humor. You provide all three without seeking power. That is rare. The chamber remained still. Even the most cautious advisors seemed to relax slightly. The tension that had threaded through the past weeks had shifted. The council was no longer evaluating him as a liability, but as an integral participant. Your uncalculated words, she continued, have produced effects that no formula, no precedent could have predicted. She paused, ears tilting slightly. I have chosen to honor them. Adrian blinked. The weight of those words sank in gradually. They were deliberate, yet neither threatening nor performative. "You speak without expectation," she said quietly, "and yet the consequences are profound. For that, your judgment will be recognized." One of the senior counselors coughed lightly. "Your Majesty, clarification. Does this imply the personal declaration regarding Envoy Vale remains valid?" Lysera's gaze swept over the chamber. "It remains valid. He will serve in a capacity aligned with truth, integrity, and cooperation." Her voice softened slightly, directed at Adrian, "and in that alignment, personal decisions may follow naturally." Adrian swallowed, not out of fear, but the realization that the moment of reckoning had arrived. He had not sought recognition or reward, yet the universe had adjusted to the honesty he had offered. Outside the chamber, subtle signals of approval rippled across the assembly. Delegates exchanged quiet gestures. Advisors relaxed their rigid postures. Even the automated systems hummed in a smoother cadence, as if acknowledging equilibrium restored. A minor technical alert flickered. An energy conduit required adjustment. Adrian moved instinctively, suggesting a sequence to stabilize the conduit while simultaneously maintaining communications with distant freighters. Lysera observed, her ears subtly angled toward him, then presented his solution to the council as a demonstration of cross-species coordination. Delegates murmured their approval, impressed by the apparent simplicity and elegance of the solution. Adrian could not help the small smirk that escaped him. Later, in the palace's zero-gravity garden, Adrian walked beside Lysera. Alien flowers glowed faintly, rotating gracefully around them. He noticed the delicate hum of energy conduits beneath the biodome, stabilizing the plants in orbit. "You have adapted remarkably," she said. "You no longer attempt to overreach, yet your influence is undeniable." "I've learned," he said, "that honesty, even when uncalculated, carries more weight than any carefully rehearsed strategy." Her ears twitched slightly. "And humor. Still useful," he admitted, "mostly as a shield against panic." She tilted her head, amusement flickering in her gaze. "And the council? They're learning," he replied. "Slowly, but they're learning." A freighter passed beyond the dome, gravitic engines tracing arcs of soft light. Adrian watched it, thinking about the weeks of tension, misinterpretation, and unexpected collaboration. He realized he had changed. Where once he had measured every word for consequence, he now understood the subtle potency of truth spoken without artifice. The Queen regarded him quietly. "You have grown," she said. "From cautious envoy to participant in outcomes, from observer to contributor, that is not a small achievement." "I suppose," he said, "the galaxy prefers action measured by authenticity rather than ambition." She inclined her head, ears flicking once in agreement. "And occasionally, one must act before fully understanding the implications." He laughed softly. "I believe I've been acting exactly that way since our first conversation." "Exactly," she said. "And yet you have endured, influenced, and been recognized, not through strategy but through honesty. That is the legacy of your words." The final council session began. Advisors presented the last minor adjustments in policy and trade routes, all of which Adrian had reviewed and refined. His solutions were adopted without challenge, framed publicly by Lysera as joint achievements. The court, once scandalized, now accepted the new equilibrium. At the end of the session, she turned to him. "Envoy Vale," she said softly, "your presence here is permanent, not by decree but by choice." "I understand, Your Majesty," he replied, "and I accept it on the same terms." The freighters outside resumed their arcs, the gravitic lattice humming in harmony. Decisions that had once threatened chaos now flowed smoothly. Every minor crisis had been addressed, every miscalculation corrected. The galaxy beyond the palace continued its unpredictable course, yet within these orbiting halls, order had emerged from honesty and trust. Adrian had entered as a cautious diplomat and would leave, or remain, as someone who understood that integrity, choice, and even a touch of humor could reshape expectations and destiny itself. Lysera watched him one last time before the chamber doors closed. Her long ears twitched slightly, attentive and deliberate. Adrian understood then that the universe had shifted not through force, protocol, or calculation,